Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wordfence Live. Over the weekend, we learned that attackers have been altering Codecov's bash uploader script, taking Codecov customers' information. Codecov is a platform that provides their customers with code reviews, and they discovered on April 1st that their systems were compromised, affecting over 29,000 customers. This is a supply chain attack affecting services that you are likely using. So today, we're looking at how this might affect you and your WordPress environments, and also what you can do about it. Stay tuned. We'll be right back to get started. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Wordfence Live. My name is Scott Miller. I'm a customer support engineer here at Wordfence. If you were watching the news this weekend, you might have noticed another breach. This time it's Codecov, a service used to look for vulnerabilities in code. Codecov lists a number of recognizable names on their client list, including GoDaddy, the Washington Post, Procter & Gamble, Atlassian, Mozilla, and many more. So even if you're not directly using a software service from one of these companies, you might be using software or cloud services that are. As such, you might be touched by this breach that was ongoing for 2 months without even knowing it. So we're going to talk about what happened, how it will affect you, and we're going to talk about a mindset for dealing with these types of attacks specific to the WordPress space. And, whether we like it or not, we are dependent on cloud computing. So even if your WordPress website is running somebody else's software, themes, plugins, set of plugins, it may be hosted on somebody else's systems at a hosting provider such as GoDaddy, who was one of the companies that was affected by this breach. So we're going to dive in today. We're going to get a little technical. We're going to tell you all about this and what you can do about it. Remember to hit the like button below the video here, as well as the subscribe and bell buttons to be notified when we go live, which is every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. Let's get started by bringing in our CEO here at Wordfence and Defiant, Mark Monder, as well as threat analyst Ram Gall. Mark, how's it going over there?
Pretty darn epic. How you doing, Scott?
Doing well here. A busy day. How about you, Ram? What's up over there?
It is a beautiful day in Arizona. I'm enjoying the cool weather before it turns into an inferno.
I was going to say, speaking of the weather, Mark, I don't think it's too great over there, huh?
Yeah, it's Colorado in spring. At 6,500 feet where we are, you get some interesting weather. And we had literally an ice storm last night. And then this morning it's 10 below, freezing. So lots of snow, though. So it's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, it is very cool. It is incredibly cool.
Right.
Too cool. Let's jump into our swag question here. Remember to answer in the form rather than in the chat itself. You're going to see a form you can click on to answer the question, which is, what is a supply chain attack? Remember to answer that in the form. We'll have you submit a few things about yourself, and we will contact you directly if you won. We will show our winners at the end of the stream today and let you know that you have won as well. So let's just dive right in. We have a lot to cover today. Ram, do you want to give us an idea of what Codecov is for anybody who's not familiar with them?
Sure. So one thing that's important to know is that software projects can get really big, and testing them all is kind of challenging because there's, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of lines of code that you have to test. So developers and QA engineers will write automated tests for that code. And the percentage of code that has automated tests written for it is called your code coverage. So Codecov helps developers figure out to what degree their code has code coverage, and gives you insight and analytics into that. It's a super useful platform for, making sure that your software is well tested, which is a very important thing. Unfortunately, it also looks at all your software, and that includes stuff like secrets and keys and access tokens. So that's where it gets troublesome. That's what Codecov is.
So I just
looking at their website, Ram, I noticed they support basically every programming language. and a bunch of other sort of tools like continuous integration platforms and so on. So I think they're really, really widely used.
Yes, yeah, I believe they're open. They're used not only by a number of corporations, but also by open source software projects, which is where it gets really interesting. So yeah, this is something that, you know, if you develop software, then you might use this and you might be impacted.
Exactly.
So I just I asked our viewers what a supply chain attack is. Mark, do you mind if I ask you what a supply chain attack is?
Sure. So a supply chain attack is kind of like, let's say if you're a toothpaste manufacturer and you want to, I'm not going to get too dark here and say poison all the customers, but
Give
maybe
them
just
cavities.
Right, give them cavities. There
Put
we go.
sugar in the toothpaste.
Yeah, and so you got a couple choices, right? You can sneak into someone's bathroom, open up the drawers, find the toothpaste, and put the nasty stuff in there, or you can go after 10 million users of toothpaste by going to the factory and putting something in one of the ingredients, and that's really what a software supply chain attack is like. You know, you can attack a single customer. So one of the customers affected in this particular incident appears to be GoDaddy. We don't have too many details about that, but it sounds like they were one of the customers of Codecov. And you could try to hack into GoDaddy's networks directly, or you could say, well, you know what, I'll just go after a software vendor that they use. I'll infect that vendor. I'll be able to contaminate GoDaddy, get into their network, get my payload in there and my backdoors and so on. But I'll also scoop up a bunch of other customers like Procter & Gamble and HP Enterprise and other folks that were affected in this. So it's an extremely effective way to infect a large number of people.
Yeah, it sounds like it has the ability to affect a huge number of people as you go down the chain there and affect these different companies. Ram, can you give us an idea of what happened with Codecov exactly?
Yeah. So what happened is that attackers basically gained access and made modifications to the company's bash uploader tool, which is basically the tool that, you know, if you're running Codecov, it's the tool that sends back the reports on how your code coverage is doing back to the central Codecov platform. And the problem is that it wasn't just sending back reports to the central platform. It was also sending back, you know, any secret information in your, you know, software repositories to the attacker's IP. I mean, when they say a bash uploader script, it's literally a bash script with some curl commands. It's just that the attackers added some extra curl commands to send the information to an extra location. I mean, I'm kind of surprised it took until April for someone to spot it, but yeah. So 29,000 customers were potentially impacted. That's how many customers Codecov has. There are some caveats to that. I guess some customers use their own version of the uploader instead of, you know, grabbing a fresh copy from Codecov's repository every time, which means that they may not have gotten the contaminated copies of the bash uploader.
It's actually a really interesting point, Ram. So they were, I guess the attack happened, was it January 31st, around there?
I think it was earlier. I want to say January, like 1st or 3rd or something.
Yeah, okay, so January, and they were compromised up until April 1st. And the point that you're making is that it's a bash script. It's not even compiled, meaning that it just lives as, the source code lives as plain text, and you can look at it at any time. So you'd think that someone would have noticed, right?
I mean, most of the people who are using this are developers, but, you know, having a security mindset is still a rare thing. And I mean, I know that from, you know, an IT perspective, there's all sorts of stuff that's just sort of klooshed together. It's like, why does it do that? Who knows? It's because it doesn't work if you don't do that. There's a lot of sort of, you know, legacy technical debt that exists because someone found a kludgy workaround and then just never found a better way to do it. So it's much easier to not see these things when you just kind of don't have a security mindset.
When you're surrounded by kludges, Ram's revealing the truth behind a lot of tech companies.
Bubblegum
that I've
and
worked
duct
in
tape.
anyway.
Bubblegum and duct tape for all of them. Including one of the ones that one of the Codecov impacted companies that I used to work at, which I'm not going to mention which one that is.
Okay, we'll chat about that offline.
Yeah. Anyways, so according to the CEO, Engelberg's post, the modified version of the tool would have affected any like credentials or tokens or keys that customers were passing through what they were using for continuous integration, which is basically just a thing where, a developer makes a code update, it gets automatically tested and then automatically deployed. So like any credentials that would have been used to like deploy software updates, including stuff that could be used to like access sensitive databases, or even the credentials that could be used to like upload files to a website, if we're going for a really simple example, might have been impacted.
Yeah, so just to kind of circle back to the original description that Ram gave, this is a bash uploader script that was submitting code coverage reports from customer systems to Codecov. And if any sensitive information was included in there, the attackers had basically put a sniffer in so that they would gain access to that information. And I guess if you're a Codecov customer and you're using that particular script, and you were submitting data between January and early April, you'd probably want to roll your incident response team if you haven't already, right, Ram?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard of data breaches caused by like people leaving like API access tokens or like database credentials in public GitHub repositories. This is basically the same type of threat, only instead of a public GitHub repository, it's only this attacker that has all of your secrets.
Yeah. So there's actually, I'm just looking at my notes here, Ram. I think there's a couple of products that Codecov has that use that bash uploader script. So if you're not using it as a standalone script, but you're using one of these products, then you probably, unfortunately, have also been affected. And it's something called Codecov-Actions, which is an uploader for GitHub, I think. And then Codecov Circle CI Orb. That's the worst brand name I think I've ever seen. My eyes are bleeding. And Codecov Bitrise Step. So
that's tied for bad branding. So let's not bash him too much for the branding.
They've already been bashed enough.
I see what you did there.
So if you're using any of those products, then you've also likely been affected. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. Anyways, they got in through, and I'm going to quote verbatim from the blog post, an error in Codecov's Docker image creation process that allowed the actor to extract the credential required to modify our bash uploader script.
Yeah.
So that's a lot to unpack.
Well, that's all that I've seen. I haven't actually. I've seen like Reuters and I think Catalan at Bleeping Computer and actually, Catalan does great work, but this is the only data that we have. So, he's also saying, well, this is just the quote. I don't think we've got any more data than that. Have you seen any more detail?
Not really, but I think we can still glean some info from this. And I think one of the important things to note is that, they used stolen credentials to get in, and specifically the kind of stolen secrets that they're using this to steal is what they used to get in the first place. They used stolen credentials to modify this bash uploader, and now they're using that to steal more like developer credentials. This kind of maybe implies that there may be some downstream impacts and further targets.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because when we were chatting offline before the show, you were making the point that there's supply chain attacks enable other supply chain attacks, credential stealing attacks enable other credential stealing attacks, and just to unpack that a little, infecting Atlassian actually in this case, right? They're a software vendor, so being able to target them via supply chain attack by going after Codecov lets you get into Atlassian, and if this wasn't discovered, and Atlassian, presumably they've rolled IR, incident response, but if they hadn't, then they could be infected and affect all of their customers. And it's the same with the credential stealing attacks, right? You steal the credential database by compromising LinkedIn or whatever, and you find passwords that folks are using, and if they've reused that password across multiple systems, then you can go after those systems as well and potentially engage in a further attack.
And this is why you should always use multi-factor authentication. Only you can't do that with automated systems because you don't want to have a human enter in a second factor every time you deploy. Because that's the whole point of making an automated system.
Yeah, but thus is the circle of cyber.
Thus is the circle of cyber.
The cycle of attacks.
Ram,
Indeed.
can you give us an idea of how they found out they were compromised? What gave there?
So a customer noticed, and again, they do have some, their customers tend to be extremely technical, and I guess one of them noticed that, maybe something was sending a DNS query to the wrong place or something, or maybe they just read the code and found something wrong. Anyways, this is why it's really important to have a good customer service department and to listen to them when they bring stuff up and to ask them regularly what's up. Hi, Tim. Hi, Adam. Hi, Scott. You guys are awesome. And yeah, we do often, poll our customer service department to see if they've seen anything weird. And, sometimes even we'll jump in and do tickets ourselves. So,
and just to expand on what Ram's saying, I literally do that on our team call on Mondays. And then on Wednesdays, again, we have a product call. And, Tim, our head of customer service, is on the call. And I'll say to him, Tim, is there any weirdness out there? And that team and our team's interaction with our customers is essentially our telemetry on if there's some sort of systemic issue with our product or anything like that. So it's a great source of data.
Yeah.
So if you're just joining, we're talking about Codecov and giving you an idea of what Codecov is. We're talking about supply chain attacks and what had happened recently with Codecov. Mark, can you give us an idea of who was affected by this supply chain attack?
Yeah, so they have 29,000 customers. I think what's happened is the press has kind of latched onto the big guys. And so, Washington Post, Procter & Gamble, Royal Bank of Scotland, Atlassian, GoDaddy, IBM, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Dollar Shave Club.
Why Dollar Shave Club? I'd almost Procter and Gamble makes Gillette, so it's not some sort of anti-competitive action.
They're going after the shaving companies. Clearly.
I hear that the shaving industry is a pretty cutthroat industry.
Oh, yeah. So they have 29,000 customers. There's been speculation online about how many are affected. I saw a number of 19,000. I think someone pulled that out of somewhere, but we don't really know at this point. It's a bad one though, and it's a lot of big enterprise customers. So.
Yeah, Dave Harrington's asking what it means for him as a GoDaddy customer, and I think honestly we can't really know for sure. I do think that there's a decent chance that these attackers could have gotten secrets that could have given them access to your website, but on the other hand, I don't think that they're likely to target individual website owners in particular.
And Dave, just to be absolutely clear, we don't know. All we know at this point is that GoDaddy is a customer of Codecov, and that's it. I don't think. I thought I saw someone, one of the journalists, reached out to GoDaddy for comment, and they didn't comment. It's very early days. I think that these folks are scrambling. A lot of SOCs, security operations centers and teams are working late and just trying to unravel what the impact is and whether there was a breach within their own systems and whether that breach moved laterally within their networks and their systems. So we don't know is the answer.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't emphasize that too much. I was more speculating than I probably should have. But
well, I'm thinking about legal and Kerry giving me a hard time if I don't say that. So
yeah, we absolutely don't know. I do think that most of these companies do have fairly strong incident response teams. So on the other hand, they're also probably fairly overwhelmed incident response teams at the moment.
Hard working right now.
Yeah,
we're talking about supply chain attacks. Ram, we've seen some recently. Can you talk a little bit about recent supply chain attacks?
So I think the one that's on everyone's mind right now is SolarWinds, which is, by the way, still ongoing. So SolarWinds basically announced back at the beginning of the year, I want to say that up to 18,000 of its customers were infected through a compromised software update in its Orion software, which is basically used for network monitoring. And the reason this was a problem is that Orion needed the credentials for all of your systems, at least read credentials, to see what was going on. So, they kind of basically found the keys to the kingdom in each Orion server. So this is a bit different from SolarWinds in that it's also impacting open source projects and not just large companies, though these open source projects are also used by these large companies. So it kind of gives the potential for, I want to say, kind of a longer and broader chain than the SolarWinds breach. just because, yeah, a lot of what, the companies that use SolarWinds would have been making, proprietary software or, software as a service stuff. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Mark?
Oh, I think it's they're both bad. Yeah, so I'm not sure I want to sort of take bets on which one is worse, and I think that data is going to emerge on this particular attack as we go. But yeah, this got a little bit of coverage over the last few days. I think the story is still emerging, and I think that it's going to be a big one. So we'll see.
I do think that there's a similar degree of recklessness to it.
Yep.
Mark, let's talk a little bit more about supply chain attacks. And have we seen a supply chain attack ever affect WordPress?
Yeah, back in, let me see over here, it was 2017, Mason Soyza, our friend in the UK. So what happened there is we started seeing some weirdness in certain plugins in the WordPress ecosystem where users were reporting that spam had been injected into their website content. Their customers were saying, hey, there's this escort ad that's appearing when people visit my website, or there's a payday loan ad, and these are actual examples of what happened. Those are the two kinds of spam that we saw. And we kind of started digging, and our team went really deep on this. We managed to actually get with one of the plugin owners that was affected, and it turns out they had sold their plugin for about $15,000 to a chap called Mason Soyza. So we followed the money, and we actually managed to get transcripts of communication between Soyza and this particular former plugin owner, and he had been bragging about other plugins that he'd bought. And so we started looking at those, and the plugins that were affected were display widgets, WP SlimStat, finance calculator, and then something called 404 to 301. And the plugin owners that sold these plugins were essentially victims in this as well. I think the community might have given them a little bit of heat early on, but they had no idea that this was going to take place. And so by buying these plugins, Mason Soyza got commit access to the source code, and was essentially able to take the existing customer base that those plugins had and deploy code to them. And he did exactly that, included a backdoor in the plugin code that would allow him to inject spam at will into the victim websites, into all websites that were using these plugins, and it was like tens of thousands. And we saw some horrendous examples, like an escort ad appearing on a school website in the UK. It was an escort agency based in London. And so this chap, he had his fingers in various businesses. He was involved in a payday loan business, involved in escort services, and was basically promoting those via this strategy. And so that was an example. And then there's another example of core potentially being affected, but we'll get to that. But we blogged about that back in 2017, around sort of September, October, I think. And if you Google the man behind the plugin spam, Mason Soyza, you can dig into that. And I'm smiling because I'm just remembering that I think, if I recall correctly, this guy actually forged some sort of letter from the High Court in the UK, trying to get our blog post removed from Google search results.
Wow.
And he sent that to Google. So there's just a little bit of a funny story, funny follow-up there, I guess.
We actually have a question from Rick Plevnicki, who was wondering if exchange issues would qualify as a supply chain attack. And I want to clarify that the exchange issues do not qualify as a supply chain attack. Those were just effectively vulnerabilities that were being exploited en masse, but they weren't necessarily being used to exploit further downstream users.
Right.
With that said, they are one of the reasons why incident response teams are incredibly busy at the moment.
So, and just to explore that for a minute, if they had hacked into Microsoft and they gained access to the Exchange source code, and they'd injected malicious code into the Exchange source code, and Microsoft had released that to their customers, that would be a supply chain attack.
Yes, it would. And Dave Harrington, don't buy your plugins from Meltdown either.
Sorry, I saw a James Bond joke over there, so I was chuckling as well. Now, Mark, you sort of teased a little bit about WordPress core. So has WordPress core been affected by a supply chain attack at any point?
Yeah, so in 2016, Matt Barry, our lead developer here at Wordfence, who is an epic guy and also an unbelievable technologist, he did some research on his own time into any vulnerabilities that api.wordpress.org might have. And he discovered that there was I think it was an API call that allowed the client, the person or computer making the API call, to specify what hashing algorithm they want to use. And he discovered that he could use a very weak hashing algorithm called Adler32, developed by Mark Adler for use on very low power space satellites, but not designed for the web. And he could specify that and actually use a kind of mathematical weakness in that hashing algorithm to compromise api.wordpress.org. He didn't actually hack in, but he demonstrated that this is feasible. And so Matt worked confidentially with the WordPress.org security team to get that remediated, and then we published our research. And if you Google hacking 27% of the web via WordPress auto update, which is the title of the blog post, you'll find that. And it's a super interesting read, especially if you're a security researcher. Matt is as I said, a spectacular technologist, and there's a lot that one can learn from his methodologies there. But the sort of end result in terms of risk there was that someone could hack into api.wordpress.org and modify the code. And the way that API endpoint works is that WordPresses globally make a call WordPresses globally make a call to that every hour roughly. I don't know if that's changed, but at the time that was the case. And they're asking if there's an update, if there's a WordPress update for core.
And they'll automatically update the minor versions, right?
I don't know. I didn't know there was going to be a quiz. No, but so they'll make the call to the API, and the API provides a URL that says, yes, there's an update, go and download it from here. And so an attacker can modify that code and say, go to my evil.org URL and download your WordPress update from there, and essentially compromise WordPress en masse globally. At the time, WordPress had 27% market share of the entire web. Now it's 40%, depending on how you count it. But it's a lot, and it's a lot more. And so that's another example, a fine example of the risks that supply chain attacks pose, particularly to things like core. If a plugin is compromised, that's one thing, but core is the big time. But I think the WordPress.org security team do a pretty darn good job. So we're probably in a good place right now. But go check out Matt's research. Google hacking 27% of the web via WordPress auto update.
So if you're just joining us, we've been going over some supply chain attacks and what we've seen directly with regard to their effect on WordPress and WordPress core. Mark, can you tell us, what should you be doing right now if you use Codecov?
Start with coffee and go from there.
Lots of coffee.
It's always a good start, huh?
Yeah, I think if you were using the tools that were affected during the breach period from January through February, March, and then beginning of April, you are going to need to do an investigation to see if you're affected. I think assume that you're breached and go from there. And in the case of enterprises, presumably they have an incident response team and they've got processes in place. So, roll full IR, figure out if you're compromised, and figure out if the attackers moved laterally within the network. And then if you're smaller than that, you might want to consider engaging some external help from a security company to see if you were affected.
Yeah. Susan noticed the puppies.
Yeah, Susan is calming down by looking at the puppies. The mountains are helping me as well stay, in line. So, Ram, we mentioned there's quite a few services here that have been impacted. So, what do you do if you're using a service that's been impacted by Codecov, such as GoDaddy?
So, here's the thing. You might not know if you've been impacted, for one thing, and there might not be all that much you can do. So it's kind of just keep doing what you should have been doing all along. Cisco CEO or former Cisco CEO John Chamber used to say that there's two kinds of companies: those that have been hacked and those who don't know they've been hacked. So I mean, the big thing is to manage your risk, and this is something that you should be doing whether or not you think you've been impacted. Just no matter what, if you have any kind of organization where security is important, and that means pretty much any kind of organization, it means looking at what's likely to happen and how bad it would be if it did happen, and kind of figuring out what things to address first. And I mean, a big part of that is just looking at stuff like attack surfaces. In this case, you can kind of treat it as almost a credential breach. So, you treat it the same way that, you would treat a credential breach, and part of that is, change all of your credentials. But at the same time, it's probably a good idea to have, someone doing code review on all of the software you use, make sure nothing got inserted into it. But I mean, just be aware of your attack surfaces, make sure that, everyone who works for you is trained to resist social engineering. Make sure that, your processes are reasonably secure and have, checkpoints where people can examine and not just, blindly just follow the process of, just run the thing, because the thing might have been compromised, as with the bash uploader. This means, being aware of what kind of vulnerabilities might already exist in your systems that could be further exploited. Maybe vulnerabilities that have like a low CVSS score where, they're not all that useful on their own, but, an attacker, with just a little bit of extra help from something like this could maybe, access a lower level user account, something like that. And, combinations of the above, things like stolen credentials from social engineering, things like weak or insecure configuration due to poor processes or misconfigurations due to human error, that kind of thing.
So I think, Ram, if I could jump in here, if you are a customer of one of these companies like GoDaddy or Atlassian, etc., for starters, keep an eye out for a notification from them. Those companies, in the case of GoDaddy, for example, it's a multi-billion-dollar company. They have a big security team. That team is competent, and they are scrambling right now. Same with Atlassian, same with other big companies that have been affected, HP Enterprise, IBM, and so on. So they'll let you know, and I think they have a legal obligation to let you know as soon as possible. So keep an eye out for notifications from them, and then if you have your own sensors in place, for example, if you're a GoDaddy customer and you have Wordfence installed, keep an eye out from notifications from Wordfence in terms of anything weird on your site. And start there, and if you don't hear anything, that is probably good.
No news is good news.
Yeah.
I believe
that doesn't
we
mean
have
stop being paranoid.
Right.
Yeah, always stay on your feet there, right, Ram? I believe we have our swag winners graphic ready to go here. So let's take a look at who won this week. We got Michael, Kristen, Matthew, John, Jesse or Usi. If the J is silent, I apologize in advance for mispronouncing your name. Thankfully, I'm not going to say your last name there, or else that would be quite a disaster for me. So congratulations to you five on winning. Those actually all look like new names, Ram, I believe. So we got
yeah. I don't think we've seen any of these before.
Some new swag winners there. So Ram, Mark, what else do we want to cover here before we wind down? Any thoughts here?
Well, I do have some fan service for the people that requested beard ornaments.
I saw we had I believe it was Susan and maybe Dave had a request for an essay type swag question for next week rather than multi-choice. So
how would we grade it fast enough, though?
I will put feedback in for that. And
So wait, someone actually asked for an essay question. In other words, they have to write an essay to win.
800 words.
Maybe short
minimum.
answer. Short answer.
It's like my least favorite examination question. Write 800 words on.
I think the multiple choice are going very quick. I think people are jumping on them. So
cool.
We'll take it back to the drawing board there.
Take it back to our producer.
Yes. We'll be. Okay, Susan is saying that's Dave's idea, so she wants nothing to do with that once the essay was brought up. Looking good, Ram. I like it.
Why, thank you. I went for the blingiest tiny flowers I could find. You'd be surprised. There's like no like floral beard ornaments available. I had to get like hair clips.
Maybe they've been involved in a supply chain attack.
Oh, you might be right. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Speaking of supply chain attack, supply chain attack is an attack strategy targeting organizations through vulnerabilities in its supply chain or distribution chain. Ram, Mark, anything to add on that? Is that correct?
Yeah. Let me read that again. A supply chain attack is an attack strategy that targets an organization through vulnerabilities in its supply chain or distribution chain. And specifically, we're talking about software companies here. I suspect that there's other kinds of supply chain attack. That's not really our area of expertise. But yeah, that captures it. I might just add the word software in there.
I think that, we're going to see a lot more of these going forward. As Mark mentioned earlier, we've seen a lot of credential breaches leading to other credential breaches, and I think that we're also going to see a lot of supply chain attacks leading to other supply chain attacks, since suppliers use each other. So
I think as the cyber environment becomes more and more adversarial, you're going to see more and more impetus behind government intervention in terms of regulation, regulatory requirements, reporting obligations, and so on. And I think that what's clear to me is that software suppliers who have enterprise customers are extremely juicy targets for the reasons that we've mentioned a few times now on this particular show. And so I think over the next, I was going to say 10 years, but I actually think it's going to happen quite a bit sooner than that. Those folks may be subject to closer scrutiny, more regulatory requirements, more reporting requirements, accreditations like PCI compliance, similar to that.
Bigger
That's
security
what I
teams.
expect to see. So.
Bigger security teams, we're going to need more people, more minds looking at stuff and making sure that it's okay.
If you've had a rough time with your job during COVID, definitely look at transitioning into cybersecurity, because the problem of the challenges of cybersecurity are not going away, and we're hiring like crazy. Check out defiant.com and go to our employment section, and I know that everyone else is hiring as well, because we're having to compete for candidates. So the job market in cybersecurity is hot, and as Ram was saying, there's a very good reason for that.
So this is a pretty awesome place to work, I have to say.
That's something I was just about to bring up. We're hiring for instructional designers. We got a senior researcher for website performance open. Mark, I believe that's related to fast or slow. Is that right?
Right. That's right.
We got QA engineer position, senior PHP developer. There may be two of those positions, and we have senior operations and security engineer. Mark, can you give an idea of some of what sets us apart here at Defiant, and some of the the good things that we offer here? I know Chloe has a nice video out. I think it's on our YouTube channel of her going over some of those things.
I actually think Chloe did a much better job than I can, but for starters, we've been remote since we started hiring back in 2015. Our team's about 40 people now. Our culture is 100% remote. It's not sort of remote as a perk, or half the team's remote and then the other half is not remote and they kind of are alienated from each other. We are 100% remote. We use Slack to collaborate. And I think just to try to give you a flavor of what it's like to work here, and I don't take credit for this. This is my co-founder and wife, Carrie Boyd, who is largely responsible for this. We are a very chill company. We'll have, we're not sort of micromanaging, oh, you need to like be here at this time and da-da-da. I mean, obviously for a live show like this, everyone had to show up on time and, kind of get the job done. But there's a tremendous amount of flexibility. It's like, hey, dude, I'm going off to the farmer's market. Cool. Get some nice eggs. Gonna go and pick up the kids. Great. And so it's just a very relaxed environment where we're really focused on outcomes rather than power. To be, I guess, a little bit cynical, a lot of companies that I've been in, it's about control and power, and I need to have the team under full control in order for them to be productive. We don't buy into that crap.
We're not really big into hierarchies here and the assertion thereof.
Yeah. And we're really just outcome focused. We ship amazing software. We write amazing software. We test amazing software. Ram's part of our QA team, and that team does an amazing job. We release it to customers. Our operations team keeps things running. Our customer service team does an amazing job of supporting our customers. We have a finance team, a legal team, and everyone else. And it's just focused on outcomes, and on serving our customers rather than sort of micromanaging or exerting control or putting people in little boxes and trying to make them conform to certain things. And everyone here works like roughly 40 hours a week. There's no like 60, 80, 100-hour week, things like that. It's not an environment where someone else is at the office, so you feel like you need to be there just to like show your face so that you're kind of competing with them. It's nothing like that. It's a very relaxed environment, and our benefits packages are amazing. So that's my pitch.
I like it. Amy had asked if they would get hiring preference if they attend the Wordfence Live all the time, and of course we will take a look. Yeah. Send in your resume if you think you're a good fit, and we will take a look. One more thing to cover: we are still offering free site cleaning and site audits to public and government-funded schools across the globe. We started this up to help K through 12 public schools in the United States with free site security audits and cleanings. But we opened this up after an immense amount of support and interest, and that is now for K through 12 government-funded or state schools in any area, including the UK, Canada, Australia, and elsewhere. So if you know of a school that could use our expertise, you can send them our blog post from a few months back, which we will try to get a link to in the chat here.
Yeah, and just to kind of expand on that, my co-founder and I are very passionate about education, in the US and globally, and we'll be chatting more about that and kind of what we're doing in that space over the next few months. But I was really excited about the K-12 initiative. If I recall, it actually wasn't Kerry or my idea. I think it was our head of security, Colette, who came up with that. Does that sound right, Ram?
Yeah, I believe so. I just wanted to add on to the company being really passionate about education. This Wordfence is putting me through college. I've gotten like so many certs in the last year, it's not even funny. So, yeah, do tuition reimbursement and certification reimbursement and stuff like that too. So other benefits.
Yeah. And just to put that in context, Ram publishes amazing research on the Wordfence blog, and Chloe does as well. And Chloe also just a long string of accreditations and certifications now, and of course we support that very much because our customers mainly benefit from you guys getting smarter every day.
Speaking of Ram's awesome blog posts, you had one, I believe, was that last week, Ram, about the Plus add-ons for Elementor Pro. We'll get a link in for that. Can you give us just a little summary there, what you found there?
So this wasn't actually my find. There's just been kind of a rash of vulnerabilities in plugins that are meant as add-ons to the Elementor plugin. But this one is not one of my discoveries. This one is about a 0-day in a plugin called the Plus add-ons for Elementor Pro, which is being actively attacked, and we've seen attacks against roughly 3/4 of our user base. Even though there's only, we want to estimate maybe 10,000 vulnerable installations. So if you see an attack against, say, an Elementor vulnerability, that doesn't just necessarily mean that you have Elementor installed or that it might have succeeded. It just means that attackers are going crazy and throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks, which is a pattern we've seen a lot lately. And we believe this is actually the same attacker we wrote about last year that was conducting, large-scale attacks against millions of websites. It's just that, it's unusual that they're actually targeting something that might net them dividends.
Now, did this require a new firewall rule in Wordfence for premium customers, or was this already protected?
We did create a firewall rule when we found out about it. And at this point, the firewall rule has already gone out to free users. So if you have Wordfence, you're protected, though we do recommend, if you have the plugin installed, to update it as soon as possible anyways.
Susan says that you're so good that she can still take you seriously, even with the beard decorations. So,
Why, thank you. That's what I aim for.
Yes. Last but not least from me, the mailing list. I preach it every week. If you want to be the first person to hear what our threat intel team is finding, you want to get onto the mailing list. You're going to hear from Chloe and Ram quite a bit, and you're going to be the first to hear about these issues and know that you're protected. If you're a free customer, you know you may need to update or find a replacement plugin. It just gives you a great idea of what we're finding.
And just to emphasize that, Scott, I think a lot of journalists use that list as a source. So you're kind of getting it at the same time as the press. So definitely join the Wordfence security.
Find out first.
Yeah, get ahead of the game. Okay, anything else from you, Mark or Ram, before we head out here?
No, that's it for me. Thanks for watching, everyone. It's always a pleasure. And if you guys have any questions, definitely hit either at Wordfence up on Twitter or Ram or Chloe, and they're always very interactive there. So yeah, thanks for watching.
Look at the awesome picture there of Billy in the Open t-shirt. Go check out open.film if you have not. We talked about it a few weeks ago with Mark and Sean. So if you missed that episode, head over and check that out.
That's awesome, Brandon. Thanks for sharing that. That's great.
We always appreciate it. From all of us here at Wordfence, we appreciate you stopping by. We'll be back next Tuesday, and we hope to catch you then. Until then, have a good rest of the week, everybody. We appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thanks for
Bye,
watching.
everyone.
Wordfence. We have better hackers.